literally every year in the initial poll, it hasn't just been one G5 team, it's been multiple. What's up, everybody? It's Trey Smith right here on the College Underdogs YouTube channel. We are the show that goes beyond the Blue Bloods. So if you're a fan of an underdog team in college football, college basketball, this is the channel for you. Hit like, hit subscribe, turn those notifications on, because I promise you, you will not be disappointed with the content we produce right here at College Underdogs. Okay, I'm going to get right into it. I'm not wasting any time. We've got to talk about this CFP committee last night essentially making history. Now, it hasn't been a long history. It's only been a little over a decade, but literally for the first time since the inception of the college football playoff, the G5, or now G6, was completely left out of the rankings in the initial poll. Last year, we had Army and Boise State in the initial poll. And if you look throughout the years of the past decade or so, literally every year, in the initial poll, it hasn't just been one G5 team, it's been multiple. It's been at least 2 or 3, as many as 4 or 5 some of those years. So here's my first question for you. Was this a coincidence or was this calculated? Do you think it was a coincidence that no G6 team is represented in the top 25 rankings for the CFP initial poll? Or do you think the committee is sending a message? And that's what I want to talk about today, because personally, I think this was by design. I believe that the committee is laying the groundwork for an agenda that's going to unfold ahead of December 1st. Okay, that December 1st deadline, if you don't already know, that's the deadline for the CFP committee to make changes and notify ESPN of their changes, whether that's expanding, whether that's changing the format. Currently, right now, it's still a 5, 7, or if they look to expand it, they would still keep it a 5, then whatever the expansion is, whether it's a 5, 11, or a 5, whatever they choose to do. None of that's officially been decided yet, but I just find it interesting that here we are less than a month out from that deadline, and the CFP committee does something that they've never done before, and that's releasing an initial top 25 playoff rankings and not even including someone from that group. So, I've been thinking about this, and it's created an interesting conversation, at least in my mind, that I wanted to bring to this channel. Because it brings up a conversation that actually divides the underdog world a little bit. Because as I was thinking a little bit deeper about this, I was like, okay, so well, who are the college underdogs? And if you think about it, you almost have to put them in separate tiers. And so if I'm talking G5, G6 teams, that would be like my tier 2 underdogs. And who are the tier 2 underdogs, right? They're the teams that are just constantly fighting for a seat at the table. They want that 5+, whatever the number is going to be, so that they have a guaranteed spot in the playoff. But then you have these, what I'll call tier 1 underdogs. And these are like teams that they have a seat at the table. They don't have very many seats at the table, but they have a seat at the table, and nobody really expects them to do anything once everybody starts eating. Think about TCU a couple of years ago when they made their run. I think about Arizona State last year, where when the playoff bracket was announced, no one expected Arizona State to do anything. But then all of a sudden, they're giving Texas a run for their money in the Peach Bowl, and now everybody in the country that's not a Longhorn fan is rallying around Arizona State. Why? Because they were the underdog. And it just shows and speaks to the power of underdogs in sports in general. And then, of course, there was that horrible blown targeting call that changed I think, potentially changed the outcome of that game. Texas goes on to advance, whatever, yada, yada, yada. But the bottom line is that when you start to separate your underdogs into different tiers, it makes this conversation as far as having that access to the CFP much more interesting. So before I continue, let me just ask you a question I want you to put in the comments right now is, whoever you are that's watching this video, Like, are you a fan of a tier 1 underdog or are you a fan of a tier 2 underdog? Because you have tier 1 underdogs in the Big Ten and the SEC as well. Teams like Arkansas, teams like Mississippi State, teams like Northwestern, teams like Illinois, teams like Indiana. Indiana's not playing like an underdog, but they are if you look at their program. Okay, then you got your teams in the Big 12, your Baylors, your TCUs, your Houstons, you've got ACC, you've got your Virginias, your Virginia Techs, you've got your Louisvilles. Like, these are teams that they could get in the playoff on that automatic bid, but like no one's really going to expect them to make any noise. So I was thinking about this year's CFP and how there was no one ranked, and potentially the agenda of the committee of, like I said earlier, laying the groundwork to potentially weed out or phase out the G5, G6 from having an automatic bid. And I mean, I think everyone kind of knows where I stand on that. Like, if you've been watching this channel for any period of time, like, you know, I'm always going to advocate for the underdogs to have access. Like, to me, that's what makes sports great. I can't remember if I already said that earlier in this episode, but like, I'm saying it again. I want to make that crystal clear. But I was thinking about this scenario. Saturday, BYU, Texas Tech, top 10 matchup. I would consider both of these teams tier 1 underdogs in the general landscape of college football. Neither one of them is a blue blood program, and neither one of them would anyone expect to win it all if they're the team that represents the Big 12 in the CFP. Okay. So let's say hypothetically this weekend, Tech beats BYU, and then both teams win out. So you have an 11-1 BYU and an 11-1 Texas Tech, and they face off in the Big 12 championship. The winner of that game is obviously going to be in the playoff. But this is something to think about. Shouldn't the loser of that game also be in the playoff? You got an 11-1 versus an 11-1. Now you have a 12-1 and an 11-2, a 12-1 Big 12 champion and an 11-2 Big 12 conference champion loser. Well, based on the current setup and kind of how the season's going right now, depending on how many 2-loss Big 10 and 2-loss SEC teams we have at season's end, if that scenario were to play out, whoever that 11-2 Big 12 championship loser might get leapfrogged by that G6 conference champion that isn't even ranked. And so it creates a conversation for me, or it poses the question for me that I'm having to like honestly ask myself is, in that scenario, so let's say it's Memphis. Let's say Memphis wins out. They'd be at that point 12-1 AAC champions. Would a 12-1 Memphis American Athletic Conference champion deserve a playoff spot over a 2-loss BYU or a 2-loss Texas Tech who just lost their conference championship game? Because that may very well be a very likely scenario that could happen. So let me know in the comments, in your opinion, who would be more deserving in that scenario and why. Now, shifting gears a little bit, if you're saying, well, I'm a tier 2 underdog fan, so, you know, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Memphis. I don't care if it's Navy. I don't care if it's North Texas. I don't care if it's, you know, Boise State or whoever, whatever team it is, UNLV or whoever. I don't know. I'm just throwing teams out right now that would be a part of that tier 2 underdog cohort of teams. You're going to say, well, whoever it is, like, they deserve to be in so they can have that access. But as I think about this, and as I not just think about this scenario, but think about this scenario in conjunction with what happened last night with the CFP rankings and the G6 being completely left out, I wonder, like, is it already too late? Because part of what's hurting, I think, the G6 access to the playoffs is the performance of the last couple of years. So Boise State got handled pretty good by Penn State. I know the final score was probably 2 or 3 possessions, but I mean, Penn State handled them. They got up on them really early, and it wasn't even a game. 2 years ago, before the CFP, when it was, whatever G5 team would get that New Year's 6 bid, Oregon beat the brakes off of Liberty. And so now we're kind of living in a world where no one's remembering Tulane and their amazing comeback against USC in the Cotton Bowl, which I was there, by the way. Heck of a game. No one's thinking about that. I don't know, man. I'd say pay attention, though, these next couple of weeks. Pay attention. Now, maybe next week, and I should have said this at the beginning. Ultimately, it doesn't matter right now in terms of what the rankings actually say, because there's a lot of season left to play, and that's going to dictate a lot. But I think this piece is something to pay attention to. Texas should be higher than Notre Dame, all those conversations, whatever. The season's going to flesh that out. But not including a G6 team in your top 25 in your initial CFP poll for the first time since the inception of the CFP, when you have a deadline regarding the CFP format for 2026 and beyond, I think that's worth paying attention to and talking about. So let me know in the comments what you think the committee's real agenda is. Let me know what you think is going to happen, how you think it's going to play out. And as always, subscribe. I'll try to get to as many comments as I can. But yeah, that's it for me today. Trey Smith, College Underdogs.